So this is just a little welcome from Croatia, and especially the video that you just saw. It's the city of Zagreb where we live. Some of those roads and some of those buildings are places that we cross daily in our ministry in Croatia. In fact, I was telling Martin now that our ministry around Zagreb is so spread out that I feel like when we go on vacation, I have to leave the city, not the office or not the local church or something, but the entire city, because that's how it's spread out all over. So Croatia is a small country, about less than 3 million people in the Balkan region in Central Europe. We are we're still a pioneer area, so we're not a district in the Church of the Nazarene. So usually the Church of the Nazarene would enter a new area that will become a pioneer area till it's organized in several churches and it puts the structures into place, and then will turn into a phase 1 district, and then it goes on till you are a phase 3 district, completely independent from outside mission work, and it's just a national leadership and national resources. So at this point in Croatia, we are in a pioneer area, which means we're still at the beginning. Although the work of the Church of the Nazarene in Croatia has started years before Martin and I arrived. It's actually, I was doing a study to understand as a church, how did we come to where we come? We have one organized church in Croatia. And I discovered that there were prayer groups from different parts of our colleges around the world, especially United States, that were sending people to Croatia only to pray over the land. And this started in the 80s. We're still thinking communist time, right? And so the people will come as a tourist. They will pray over the area, and then they would come back. So they were short-term in that territory. And it was in the 90s when communism fell, after the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, that we started sending a little bit longer periods of time students or missionary groups that will stay just a little bit longer. And it's in the 90s, in the mid-90s, that we sent 3 students from SNU, Southern Nazarene University. I know, I still have to learn these short. And what was interesting as I did this study is that these students stayed there for 1 year. And when we enter a new area, we're required to go to a church. Not required, but it is, as good Christians, we join a local church. And if we don't have a Nazarene church, we will join another church. And lately, because we don't have a space as a church, we rent from the Church of Christ. And we have been worshiping now over a year now in the Church of Christ building. And we discovered that those 3 students were joining the Church of Christ for that year that they were in Croatia. And it made me think how many times those 3 young people sat on that space praying to God that one day the Church of the Nazarene will have a church in Croatia. And here we are as a church worshiping God in that space. I reached out to some of them. I haven't heard from some of them because sometimes as ministers, we feel like we pour our heart, and sometimes we are not long enough around to see the fruits of our work. And sometimes we will never see them. And that's okay. We make peace with that work. We have to think generationally and not just for our specific call that we have. But it was such a revelation to us because we see how God is working, that we are not standing on a ground that we started it. There have been people before I was born who were praying for Croatia. And we as a church, when we come and do mission work today and we gather today, we're not just praying for our work that we are doing today. We're praying for the generations to come in Croatia. We're praying for the churches that will come, for younger people who are not even born now, who will be faithful to God because we were faithful. And they don't have to start from scratch. They will start from our shoulders. And that's what we want to do as a church. But Croatia is also a country although it's a small country, it's a rich country. It has a rich language too, which we're trying to manage and trying to learn. Although I speak 4 languages, it's still hard to learn a 5th one. And most of our ministry actually has been in English, but our children have mastered it. So now our children speak fluent Croatian. And when they don't want us to understand, they speak to each other in Croatian. And when we go to restaurants, we see extra food coming at the table that they ordered. So usually it's French fries, extra French fries. But Ruben today wanted to share a little bit with you just the Amazing Grace, a short verse of Amazing Grace in Croatian. He would like to sing that for you if you have a second. Here.
Milost koja sve vodi nas, daje snagu i mir. Oživjela je život moj, ja slijepa sad vidim.
Thank you, buddy. He has been joining Dad in the worship team in church, so pray for Ruben because he just started. He wants to preach. He's a great preacher, so he has a great legacy, and he is wanting to sing too. Now, for those of you, I think most of you, we know you. I have seen only few new faces in here. Maybe if you don't know us, as Lira was saying, we are the Glendennings. We are missionaries in Croatia. We are not just missionaries in Croatia. We have also what we call field roles. So both Martin and I were part of the structure of the Nazarene churches like this. They're like regions, which include, for us, we're part of Eurasia region, that it includes Europe and South Asia and everything that is in between, including at this moment Ukraine and Russia. And from the Azores to down South Asia, all of that is the Eurasia region. And we used to have regional roles, but we knew that once we have kids and we couldn't travel that much, then we would get some local roles. And so the Lord opened the door for us to go to Central Europe fields. So each region is divided in smaller fields, and we are part of what is called the Central Europe field. And it goes Denmark up here, and then at this moment we have work in Poland, Denmark, the Scandinavian countries, then Hungary, Croatia. We're just entering in September Slovenia. We have a family missionary that will join us, our team. Then we have Croatia. We have Serbia, which we entered just a few years ago with the refugee crisis, with the Syrian refugee crisis. And then we go down Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, Kosovo. And I think I haven't forgotten any of them. So, but we hope in the future we are also looking for possibilities to enter Bosnia with the work of the Church of the Nazarene. So Martin and I have roles in Croatia. So in Croatia, I lead the work of the Church of the Nazarene. And I'm also currently pastoring the local church that we have there. And at the field level, I take care of the theological education, and specifically, I'm very passionate to empowering women who feel a call to ministry. Because being a woman in ministry, it's hard in itself, but being a woman in ministry in the Balkans, it's another story. And this is a highly male-dominant culture. It's embodied in every structure of the society, so I have a big passion that those women who feel a call to ministry, that they find their own voice. And unfortunately, I tell people the only women who make it now are the women who know how to put man in their place. And so, I don't say this, but it isn't aggressive. But my first day that I had, my first week that I was in Croatia, I met with the leader of a college to see if we could collaborate together in the theological education, because we're accredited with the same agency. And I wanted to work with him, to see how we can maximize resources and time, especially with COVID and with economy, and then the Ukrainian war, and how can we collaborate together? And the first thing he told me as I'm in the room with him, he's like, well, let me tell you, I don't think women should be pastors. And, and I said, I did not ask you that question. That wasn't my question. My question is, can we work together to empower those that God will call to ministry? And then he said, yes, now we are great friends, we're good friends, and we work together. But just to say, this is a passion of mine in the Central Europe field. Martin, on the other hand, has several roles too. He is the coordinator for Nazarene Compassionate Ministries for all Central Europe. And at this point, he's very busy, especially with the crisis that has happened, the Ukrainian and Russian crisis. He has been very busy. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. And he also does the finances for the Central Europe field and for Croatia. At the same time, he helps the region with consultation. He used to be the regional finance coordinator. He's still available to help them when they need. So, and we have 2 little boys who keeps us busy. So life, it's never dull for us, and it has been great. So last time we saw each other, we talked about the Middle Eastern crisis, right? We shared with most of you what God has been doing in Croatia and how the church has been responded to that crisis. As you might know, or I don't know now, maybe it's old news, but some years ago, the Syria was in a war. Of millions of people left Syria, and they were transiting through the Central Europe countries. Croatia was one of them, and we as a church responded to that crisis by being where people were, helping them with what they needed during their transit time. And with time now, where we are now, they're not anymore transit, they are integrating in the Croatian culture, and that's what we do. We help people to integrate in a lawful way, to integrate in a fruitful way, to become citizens that contribute into the society and feel empowered on their own. Now, it sounds really great. It's not as romantic as it sounds. It takes a lot of work, but this is what we were doing, and we have been to continue to do it. And actually, we have a video. Last time we shared a message from a girl. We called her Miriam, just for her safety, and she wanted this time to send you a message of greetings. So we will see if we can't. Yeah. So for those who remembers her story, she was a woman. She was Muslim, came from the region of Gaza, and she had a terrible, terrible life. And when we met her, she was depressed. She was suicidal. The only person that kept her alive was her son, practically. That's the place where we met. And then through that process, in being the hands and feet of Christ, she came to Christ. I don't know if you remember that story, but we will not talk again about that story today. But she wanted you to know that she's doing really well. And God has really doing incredible things in her life. And I love, because when we talk to people, or people who have come to Christ that have no theological understanding, they have no language, no theological concept, can describe the transformation that is happening in them in an incredible way. So one of the things that she always says, before, I was just trying to please God by, fasting and praying, but nothing was happening inside me. But now God is changing me from within. I don't know, Pastor Cezi, I'm changing. Something is happening to my heart, and I don't understand, but I love it. And so that's what we want to see, and that's what we get to see happening in some of the people in Croatia. But that was the Middle Eastern crisis, which we continue to serve. We have few people now transiting through Croatia from the Middle East. And then we had the Iranian crisis. That was another one. As Iran and Serbia were making some agreement, Serbia opened the door for Iranian people to come visit Serbia without visas. A lot of single moms or women who were abused, or religious people, Christian people, took the advantage to leave Iran and then stay in Serbia, creating a humanitarian crisis in Serbia that broke the agreement at that point. But all those people then were coming to Croatia, crossing the borders in most dangerous places sometimes, or crossing to Bosnia and then coming to Croatia, because Croatia is the first country that is European Union. And now at this moment we are also Schengen. I know these are a lot of political terms, but Schengen is just free movement of people. There is no more borders between Croatia and Austria and Slovenia and other EU countries. That's what it means. Before they had borders and police. It was hard to cross from Croatia to these countries. Now there's no more borders, so people just come to transit because they can transit easily. Before, they would stay in Croatia about 6 months to get maybe some more money, work a little bit, and then pay the next smuggler to cross the border. And now we don't get them anymore in that. They just transit. And then we had, after the Iranian crisis, we had few crises around the world. The Afghanistan, we're having a lot of people from Burundi now. And with the Ukrainian crisis, we're not just getting Ukrainian and Russian refugees, we are also now getting refugees from Cuba, because a lot of people from Cuba could travel easily to Russia, and then now the borders are loose, and then they come and ask asylum in Europe. So there is a lot of movements of people from the African continent and from the Asian continent, and we expect, according to the statistics, in the next year, especially with climate change and with drought seasons that are happening in Africa, we expect more movements of people towards the northern part of the hemisphere. So this is where we left it last time. But before I go to the next one, I wanted to share with you a Bible story that helps us to see what's happening in Croatia. I always love the narratives of the Bible to be our glasses to see what God is doing currently into our realities. And I want you to open your Bibles in Mark. Oh, we're doing Matthew, Martin? Okay, that's wrong. We're going to do Mark. Sorry, I gave the wrong. But that fits there too. We're using the version of Mark, let's put it this way. And we'll read from Mark 10, from verse 46 to 52. Okay, Mark 10, verse 46 to 52. And it goes like this. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which meant son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. And Jesus told him, and this is going to be our question for today, "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. What do you want me to do for you today? I love this story because, we read just this part. But this story is a sequence of other two stories. The first one is the sons of Zebedee. And the sons of Zebedee asked Jesus that they wanted Jesus to do something for him. And Jesus asked them the same question. He says, "What do you want me to do?" And they said, "We would like to sit on your right and on your left." And Jesus says, guys, you don't know what you're asking. I don't think so, because are you going to be able to drink from my same cup and have the same sacrifice? And they say, yes, not knowing at all what they were signing up for. And Jesus said, I'm sorry, I can't grant you that wish, but anyway, you're going to pay the same price that I'm paying, so brace for that life. And the second story is a rich man who had lived a very faithful life. And he comes to Jesus too. And he has questions. It's like, Jesus, what else do I need to do? And practically Jesus says, you have done everything right. You've honored your mother, your father. You have kept all the commandments. Now you have to give it up all and follow me. And the man, it's hard. So he goes and he doesn't follow Jesus. And here comes this blind man. Now, the Bible tells that he asked to have his sight again, which means he was not born blind, but he became blind at some point of his life. And we don't know how he became blind. And and Mark is not really interested in giving us that information. He is just sitting on the side of the road. And Jesus now has been traveling. He's in Jericho. It's about 12 miles from Jerusalem. And he's going to Jerusalem, where he will enter Jerusalem with the Palm, what we celebrate as the Palm Sunday. And this man, as he's sitting on the side, he hears crowds. I can imagine. How many of you have been to Israel? Okay, we have few people who have been to Israel. So there's the small roads usually in the cities. And I can see the crowds really making noise as they go into these little paths in the city. And Jesus is being followed by a lot of people because they're going to celebrate Passover in Jerusalem. So they are migrating all together, which was normal. It's not just unique to Jesus, but people from different parts of the world, not just Israel, they would travel and go to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover together, not just alone. And so this man, I wonder how did this man knew Jesus? But if you have been working with the Middle Eastern people, as long as I've been, you know that by now there's been 3 years of ministry of Jesus. The world has spread everywhere. Everybody knows what has been happening. If something happens in the church, usually I'm the last one to know it, but everybody in the church will know about it because people love to meet together, they spend time together, and they share life together. And so that's what was happening here. The world has spread everywhere, and somehow in this man's heart and mind, he thought that if he could just meet Jesus, and if he could one day see this Jesus, maybe he would be his last hope. And Jesus is passing. And then the man starts calling. He have heard. Now Jesus is passing by. I don't know if he that day decided to stay there because he knew Jesus would pass, or he was hoping that Jesus would pass. He knew probably Jesus was in town. And so he's just waiting. And then he hears the crowd. And he just puts his wish out there. He can't see. He doesn't know where Jesus is. He just calls and says, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Have you felt sometimes like that, where you throw your prayers out in the air, hoping that Jesus will hear them? And that's what this man did here. By faith, he just threw his prayer, hoping that Jesus would hear him. But people shushed him. People saw this man as invisible. People didn't see this man at all. He was trash of the society. We don't know his story. We just know he's blind. He has a handicap, and we know how the Jewish people dealt with people who have some form of disability. Probably a curse. He must have been doing something bad in his life. We don't know. Maybe he has. I don't know. But the Bible is not interested to telling us that. All we know that there is some injustice in here Because no man, no matter what they do, their place is in a corner of the street being shushed by those who have some power. And he's there. And in fact, the word, many rebuked him, the word in Greek here is used, it's used for exorcism. You know, they were trying to do exorcism on him to shut him down. But he was not going to miss this opportunity. He kept shouting even louder, what is going to happen? These are those moments of our life where it says, what's going to happen? It can't get worse than this. And so he, with his faith, he just shouts louder. And Jesus, I can see Jesus stopping. And this time, he doesn't go to him. Many times, Jesus goes to people. But this time, he makes the people who were shushing him go and take him and bring him to him. And then the man comes. And Jesus asked this beautiful question, what do you want me to do for you? I love Jesus. This is the man with all the answers. And here we have him. Somebody wrote I don't know, I don't remember where I read, but Jesus asked over 300 questions in the 4 Gospels. A man who asked questions, a man who had all the answers, kept asking questions. And he put the power on this man. He has the power, but he transferred the power on this man and asked this man, what do you want me to do for you? And the man says, I want to see again. Basic. He didn't want to sit on the right or on the left. He didn't want to do extraordinary things. All he wanted to do is to see. And Jesus grants his wish. And the Bible says, Jesus says, go, your faith has healed you. But while the faith has healed him, then now he can see the person who healed him. It's not something in his imagination. It's now that he can see and touch, and the Bible says that he threw away everything he had, which was little, and went along, followed Jesus. This year I've been reflecting a lot on radical hospitality. I grew up with radical hospitality. My father and my mother had guests in our house all the time. 365 days a year, 300 of those, we had people either staying in our home or eating in our home. We were 5 girls, our 2 parents, in 1-bedroom apartment. And there was all the time people. There were politicians coming to our home, and there were enemies of the countries eating at our home. There was never a distinction. We never knew the distinction. We knew only people. The area of Albania where I live, radical hospitality is essential. For many years, we didn't function with the laws of the countries. We functioned with what is called the laws of the mountains. And at the heart of the law of the mountains, there were a lot of bad things with the law of the mountains, especially the blood feuds that went for generation to generation. But hospitality was always the most important thing. It suspended all the enmities. So if your enemy, with whom you have been for generation in a blood feud, if they came to your home, all the violence, all the other laws are suspended. And you needed to host them, to feed them, and you could not touch them till they went back to their home. These were the laws of hospitalities. And my family, if there was a grading with stars, a 5-star grading, in the mountains, my family had 6 of them. And so I grew up with radical hospitality. The word hospitality in the Bible is called philoxenia, which means love for the stranger. Philo, love, xenia, stranger. Now, when we do hospitality, it's usually only for our families. That, according to the Bible, would not enter in the hospitality definition. But here we see, in this story and very similar stories in the Bible, we see God's hospitality that is radical. His love for the strangers, his love for the least of these, and his love for those who society shushes. And as a church, that's what we look for. This has been a challenge for me because I'm a woman of answers, not questions. Like many of you, I have a lot of answers. But this year I've been really challenged in asking questions and not just, even if I know the answer. This is how this looks for us in this past year. Last time we talked about the war in Ukraine had just started. We talked about how we as a church went to the borders with Poland and in all the different countries. I myself and Martin did a trip to Poland. I was in the very first weeks there setting up the infrastructure for the church, renting spaces for offices, apartments for volunteers who would come and serve there, and then serving myself for 10 days there. And as a church, we always position ourselves in those places where other people do not want to be. Because it's important that the presence of Christ is always in those places. But when I came to Croatia, I was met with a very angry crowd. Several people from my church asked to meet with me and said, from the Middle Eastern community, and they said, Pastor Cezi, we are hurt and we are angry. Are you going to abandon us too? In their mind, the world had a different response to the refugee crisis of the Ukrainian community than they did for the Middle Eastern community. There were only 2 communities in Zagreb that works with Middle Eastern refugees. We are one of them, and we are the only consistent one. The others did projects here and there. And they said, the system are going to push us away, the government are going to push us aside. Are you going to push us aside too? And I said, no. This is not a matter as a church to think, oh, now let's move this group so the other group can eat and sit at the table. In the kingdom of God, the table is infinite. We can have all of us sit at the same table. We do not talk about switching people. We talk about enlarging table because this is how the radical hospitality of God works. But I said, if this is what you guys are feeling, you know what? We will not seek to work with Ukrainian refugees in Croatia. Now you would say, why not? You just talked about radical hospitality. But sometimes radical hospitality needs also wise decisions. And it was true, the system was putting this group aside. Now, that doesn't mean that if there were Ukrainian refugees, we would say no because we decided so. We just decided that we would not actively seek for that ministry, that we will allow God to send that ministry to us. And so 6 months have passed. The situation of the Middle Eastern people changed. And then ministry came to us because we knew all the churches now had discovered their love for refugees, white European refugees. This is not a critique in itself. Like this should be the response that the Ukrainian refugees had from the European should be the answer we all should do. But it was very loud, the difference, to ignore as people of God that we talk about equality and seeing all people with the same eyes. So after this, there was somebody on internet that said, we need some more clothes for a refugee center that is it's an hour away from the city of Zagreb. Is anybody who could help with some clothes and shoes and baby items? And I said, hey, I'm happy to help with that. We had a lot of donations. We can give the donations. And then the lady was very curious. I think she was stalking me on Facebook and was very curious to what I do. And she asked me to meet with her. She was a Russian who had married a Croatian and lived in Croatia for 20 years. And she was helping a lot of the Ukrainian refugees because most of the Ukrainians speak Russian. And so she met with me and I said, I saw you are from a church organization. I said, yes, I am. I'm actually pastor at a church here in Zagreb. She says, we're dealing with the Mormons. Are you like them? And I said, no, we're different. And she's like, are we going to be people you're going to serve, or are we going to be your project? Because I said, with the Mormons, we saw their project. And I said, no, we do not sneak Jesus in between sandwiches. We will help you. And then the question came, what do you want me to do for you? Because while Jesus asked that question, this is the question that God has mandated also to the church to do as we serve to others. You're going to go into this project now, right? In serving the home. Yeah. The question the pastor asked today is, what are we going to do? And that is the question that we extend. Although we have some answers about Jesus' salvation and God's salvation, that's not what we shoot people with. What do you want me to do today? And as I met with a Ukrainian coordinator in this little city where 150 refugees are, mostly women, 40 of them are children and teens, and half of them are elderly people. She told me what she needed, because it's important, especially when we do humanitarian work. We have the power. We come with the resources. We have the financial power. But we don't want to create dependency relationships. What we want to create is partnership. So partnership means that you have to give power to the other party. And what we give power to the other party is that they tell us what they want us to do. Within reason, of course. If they ask a Ferrari, I will not give them a Ferrari, but within the reason. The same thing that Jesus did with this man, we also show up in those lost places of our society that looks like a very forgotten. After a year, the Ukrainian refugees is not news anymore. And we knew that once reached the 6 months, all the organizations the churches that were involved with the refugees will run out of funds and we will have plenty of work. So it wasn't an issue, it was just a timing for us. And so it happened. So we started serving in this refugee center where we serve. We go twice a week. We started with English classes. We started with children program. How much time do I have? Okay. We started with children programs. We started working with women, focusing on mental health, because PTSD will be one of the main, and depression are the two main things that we will be struggling in the coming years with the refugees. But I see a difference in both of those effects, where there is a presence of Christ and where there is the presence of the church that makes people feel they're not alone. And what we guarantee, we do these programs and we give stuff and all of that, so can any other organization. But the difference that we make as a church when we show up into these places where the society shushes is presence. The presence of Christ. And honestly, I can't measure that for you. Martin and I know that when we bring the presence of Christ as a church in a place, the things that are important we cannot measure, and the things that are not important, that's what we can measure. So I don't have numbers for you, but I do have some stories. I was teaching English And only one woman showed up in class. There was some other event and they had all gone. And this woman has done her homework, and she had to do several sentences that says, I like this, I like this. And so she had written in one of these sentences, I like museums. And I said, what type of museums do you like? And she said, I like modern museums. I said, did you have museums in your city? And she started sobbing. And for the next 20 minutes, I saw a beautiful video of her city before it was destroyed. And then in the other 10 minutes, she showed me how her home was completely destroyed, and sobbing in that moment. I reached to her and I prayed for her in that moment. But this is how healing moments take place. Now, it's not everything measured. Are they going to say the prayer of salvation? Jesus didn't make anybody say the prayer of salvation, by the way. They just experienced Christ into that moment, that presence, and they decided they wanted to follow him. Because it's these healing moments, spiritual or mental or physical, that open our eyes to see who really loves us. We also had a church camp this year. One of the things we do, we try to, the Ukrainians are very artsy people. They love art, they love music, they love concert. And in order to deal with their mental health, we try once a month to organize something that will lift up their spirit. Because most of them, 150 of them, live in one center that it's an old hotel, and each family has one room. Can you imagine to live with all your family and children in one bedroom apartment? Like not apartment, just one bedroom with one bathroom. And many of them, it has taken a toll, especially when your spouse is not with you, your husband is not with you, which is the case of most of the women here. And so we took them. There was the Black Swan was playing at the theater, and it was by a Ukrainian company. That's why we took them and helped them. But what we did also as a church, we decided to help them also with, we had a church camp. And at the church camp, we have not invited Ukrainians at this church camp. By the way, we have zero language in common with this group. Talk about presence. I don't speak any Russian or Ukrainian, and they don't speak any Croatian. So I can't use my minimum Croatian with them. So it is really about presence that we're making a difference here. But we were able with them to, as we were organizing our church camp, everything that could go wrong went wrong. Like I would be another sermon on everything that could go wrong before a church camp. But what happened, several families got sick, and we had like 4 families in the church who could not make it to the camp. And then we said, okay, let's see if anybody from the Ukrainian group could come. But then we would have to find a translator, and it's like a week before. And 4 of those families, specific families we have got close to, decided to join us. And the Russian lady who has been helping us with the translation, she was free that week because her daughter was going in a camp. And she said, you know what, I'll join too so I can translate for you. And so Martin, I don't know if you have some pictures of the camp. Yeah, it's okay. But we were able to minister for them for 3 days. And the focus of the camp was centered in God. How God wants to bring us healing mentally, spiritually, and physically. And they all open up. Now, we did shock them with some stuff because this was their first ever time in a Protestant community. And before, they are Orthodox in tradition, but they go to church like once in 2 years, maybe for Christmas if they're free. So they're not very religious people, but the love of the community with the message, they all cried at the end and sent messages of how much they needed that time and how much they experienced healing in their heart, in their mind. But overall, they said what really stuck with them was that God, and one of them used, really, God has been with me. I can see how God has been with me into this journey. I don't know how these stories, I'll have to come next year to update you what is happening. And if it's going to happen anything, I am okay with that. The presence of Christ makes a difference when we show up into these places. We never go with an agenda in these places. We always go with hope. And hope means the ability to see possibilities. And as we look around, we look for God to see what he's doing and how he wants us to join. Sometimes it looks like pure humanitarian work. Sometimes it looks a prayer. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like having 10 children jump on you. That's how it looks like. And the last thing that I wanted to share with you, we brought a group from Mount Vernon to do a concert there. And they asked me, Cezi, why did you bring it here? Why not in a cathedral in Zagreb? And I said, the cathedrals in Zagreb have plenty of concerts. And none of you probably would be able to come there, or maybe just few of you. So I want you to know that that's what God does with people. I can have the big show in Zagreb, but I wanted you to be blessed. And some of the older women started sobbing because I don't want them. We do not want them to feel alone. And the last thing, and this is that one of the things that we have tried to do 10 months ago, we decided that the war in Ukraine, 10 months ago, we thought that the war of Ukraine will be shorter. We all hoped that. So we were asking IKEA to help us to give a discount so we could buy some boxes, because many of people have like the diaper boxes. That's where they were putting their clothes to organize their rooms, but everything was messy in their rooms. So it's really hard, right, to live with a family with 3 kids in one bedroom. And so we were working with IKEA to see if they would give us a discount. We had a $5,000 budget to buy some things for the families, hoping that it's going to last 6 more months and they all going to go home and we all going to be happy. But we realized when we submitted that project, IKEA said, yes, we'll come to you. And after 8 months, they haven't come to us. And so Martin and I wrote to them and said, okay, guys. Oh, they said that they would sponsor the entire $5,000. And we said, great, but then they never came back to us. And then we said, you know what, just give us a discount if you can. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead because people need this. And at this point, we all have made peace that this war is going to go for a long time. It won't end anytime soon. So we needed more than just few things for their rooms to make their life comfortable. So IKEA, feeling guilty, came to us and said, listen, guys, actually UNHCR, which is a United Nations Humanitarian Crisis Services, came to us and came to IKEA and said, we will sponsor the project. So they came to visit, met with me at the refugee center, introduced them to the coordinators there, and they asked me, listen, the project is a bit small. Why don't we make it a bit bigger? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, the common areas have now been destroyed after, almost over a year. The tables are not made for that capacity, the couches, there's no children area. And so I said, why don't you make a list and you furnish the entire different common areas, plus add some more stuff to the rooms. And we said, all right. So spent 7 hours in the IKEA website doing the most shopping I've ever done in my life and giving each code. And then when it turned out from $5,000, it went to $35,000. And I was like, this is too much. And so I sent it anyway, gave a call to IKEA. I said, listen, this has increased. And she's like, don't worry, Cezi, we got this. And then they call me back and says, why don't you add some more items for the outdoors? I was like, sure, if you insist. And so we were able then to, what started a $5,000 project went to 40,000 euros, which is about almost $50,000 project. And we were able to furnish the entire rooms with some new beds, the tables, the children areas, and common areas. And at the end, many of these women wrote to us and said, now we can live like humans. Because now they had a flower in their room, they have boxes, they have some shelves where to put their stuff. The entire thing was organized. The elderly people sent me pictures. The kids got all their toys and a corner for the kids. And the elderly people told me, because I had designed some tea areas, the Ukrainians love tea, black tea, designed some in each floor for the elderly people to sit down and have their tea in the common areas. And each of them just sent, thank you, because now it feels a little bit like home for as long as this place is going to be home. Presence. It's all about presence and radical hospitality. There is no radical hospitality without presence. What do you want me to do? So I hope that we as a church, as you get involved in your local ministries here, that we always show up into these projects, initiatives, that they're not just projects. And I want us to know that. It's presence. Your biggest difference, it's not going to be what you're going to clean or what you're going to fix, but it's going to be your presence. Your presence of God with no agendas, because we love agendas in the church. If you're going to go and show up in one of these places with no agenda, you will see God. He has the agenda. We are just the hands and feet. So we always show up into places knowing that God has been there. This leads me to my last point. Do I have time? Am I done? You have to tell me, or I'll stay here all day. Everybody hungry? All right, last thing, stay with me. But I wanted to share with you also, because I would like, you're not just a church we go to speak to and then we leave and maybe we don't see you again. You are our home, right? This is our home church. And so we come back, but I want you to look a little bit, to know how to support us with prayers. As you saw, radical hospitality does require presence, but we have been looking now to take this radical hospitality to a next level. We have been looking also to have a space as a church. We have not been successful because the real estate market, it's out of control at this moment in Croatia. What we were looking last year, 3 years ago, has doubled in price now. And so as a community, Martin and I have been looking to either buy a space or buy land where we can build a ministry center where we would like to extend more of this radical hospitality. This is not just a church building. This will be the district center. This will be the educational center. We're hoping to help single parents like you guys doing, because it's hard as a single parent to have a full-time job and not know your kids are in school just half a day and know where to put them. There's so many parents, single parents who have kindergarten kids, and Zagreb has so many young families that it's almost impossible to find sometimes a kindergarten place. And so many of them so we're hoping to look at that. We have so many refugees who are in transit times. We would like to build some apartments on the 3rd floor where the families can stay in transit till they find a new place to live. So we want this space to be the center of the community. Now in Europe, it functioned different than neighborhoods. You have all these zoning. For us, each area is like a small town. And where you find your coffee shops, your supermarket, your play areas, where you meet your neighbor. If you go to your coffee shop, your person will come with the coffee before you order it because they see you every day there. That's where you meet your neighbors. That's where I do ministry, in my coffee shop. Like in the coffee shop in my neighborhood, I've come to meet most of my neighbors just there or at the playground. And so we want this place to become that ministry center that becomes that radical hospitality presence. And so I would like for all of you to pray for us as we are going in this deputation. We will promote a little bit this project in the future. We don't know where the Lord wants us, in which part of the city. We're praying all over the city, and we know that you guys know that at the right time, at the right place, the Lord will provide. But if any of you is interested to partner with us on that, we do have a code through Global Mission. You can get tax credit with it. If anybody or know any rich person who would like to sponsor it, you're welcome to do so. But if not, please pray for us as we look to take our radical hospitality into the next level, because that's where we see the difference is made. God bless you, and thank you for having us.